Hey everybody, and welcome to Season 2 of Welshy's Reviews. Yeah, apparently I have seasons now. Well, according to IMDb I do, anyway. Saying that, if you believe IMDb, my budget is £2,000 and I'm more popular than the Archbishop of Canterbury, which, in a way, means I'm more popular than God. I like that, but it's not something I'm going to let go to my head. So before I get onto the main theme of the video, there is one thing I want to talk about quite seriously, and in order for me to do that, it'd probably be best if I do that out of character. So, for those of you who don't know, towards the end of last year, I kind of went on hiatus due to a number of factors. The first being work, second being time, but the biggest reason was that I went through a mild case of depression. And I just want to say now thank you to everybody who sent me messages and who really seemed concerned about me. I didn't expect that, and honestly, thank you very much for that. It was hugely appreciated, and it was a really nice surprise. I also want to thank Holly Brown, my bunny, and Rob Walker for allowing me the time to get myself together and just decide what I wanted to do. There was no pressure from them, and it was a case of get better and let us know what you want to do. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you guys. Now does this mean I'm going to stop taking shots at Channel Awesome? Fuck! No. No, I'm just going to expand things this season and, I don't know, start taking shots at an organisation that works on a, I don't know, who we like regardless of what they've done system. Other than them. Or them. Yeah, that'll do. Okay, back in character. Oh, that's better. I'd also like to thank all the people who followed me on Twitter in the lead up to MagFest 2012. MagFest was absolutely awesome. I got to meet the producers of the website, I got to meet the great fans, and I had a great time. What did you get up to, Rob? I've been really trying. You fucking whore. Respect. Speaking of Twitter, I've also passed 3,000 followers while I've been away, so here's a shout out to my 3,000th follower. Coincidentally, she's someone I also know in the real world, and she likes to hit me a lot. Still, she has her flaws too. Not only is she a Rose fan, but she's also a Twilight fan as well. How did she do that? What? Oh, yeah, the bet. The bet I had with Elisa, I lost and had to wear the corset, which I did. With pride, I might add. Elise, I extend my hand to you, a worthy winner. Elise?
The year was 2012, and Welshy had...
Oh god, you know, one day I am going to actually ask for a cameo, and I will get Elisa on the other end, and to tell you the truth, I'm going to be really shocked when that happens.
Shh! You address me incorrectly.
Alright, how should I address you?
You must call me Maven after the night has fallen.
It's the middle of the day.
In your time zone, maybe. It is always night, somewhere.
Right. Well, I mentioned Lise to extend my hand in congratulating her on winning the bet. No doctors or makeovers were needed for this, so please, enlighten me. Why are you here?
I am here to point out that in all your horror reviews, you have never once touched upon vampires.
This isn't a horror film.
You only concern yourself with primitive forms of horror and things like your Doctor Who.
You do realise there are a few vampire Doctor Who episodes, right?
There are?
Well, yeah, there's a few. Off the top of my head, Vampires of Venice, State of Decay.
Oh! We totally need to do a crossover on those sometime.
Yeah! Hold on. What facet of your character am I actually addressing right now?
Then, it is decided. You and I shall join forces to review your doctor and his encounters with my people.
Great, so when do you want to do this?
Look for me on the third day of the full moon.
So, later in the year then?
For now, my crypt beckons to me as the night mist rises. Until we meet again.
Weird. Yeah, I know. This opening went on a bit too long, but, you know, I've been away for 3 months. I kind of want to get people up to date on what's been going on in my life. And, you know, do something a little different. I don't normally do this at the start of a video. Oh, yeah, sorry. the video review. Casino Royale was the 21st film under the James Bond banner, released back in 2006, and was without doubt the most hyped, the most anticipated, the most important, and the most controversial Bond film ever released. It had been 4 years since the release of the previous Bond film, Die Another Day, a film that, on its release, was pretty well received, but given time has been critically mauled for its over-the-top sequences and story, and before people jump on me for saying this, one kick-ass sword fight sequence does not a good film make. Just ask this guy. And so the production decided to do the in thing for Hollywood right now and give the series a complete reboot and retool. Out went Pierce Brosnan, who I think did a fantastic job in the role. Out went the supporting cast like Q, Moneypenny, and these guys. And in came Daniel Craig, and if you thought the casting of Matt Smith as the Doctor was met with bad taste, then you ain't seen nothing when it comes to the casting of Craig. Not only did fans and websites get up in arms, but even newspapers too. It was this whole outcry that actually made me give Smith a chance when I heard about his casting as the Doctor, because Craig had to put up with far worse in his appointment in the role, and, quite gratifyingly for him I'm sure, pretty much silenced a vast majority of his critics by the time the film was released. I mean, would you walk up to somebody who does this and call him James Blonde? I was a few months into my travel year when the film was released, and I ended up seeing it while I was staying in Cairns in Australia, and I was blown away by it. Was it perfect? No. No film is, and anyone who says a film, series or show is perfect is someone it is impossible to debate with, and you should never take their opinion seriously, like these people. And I'm going to say something very seriously from the start. I think Casino Royale is the best James Bond film ever made. Now, for those of you who've already turned the video off after hearing me say that, this message is for you.
Fuck you!
And for those of you who stuck around, believe me when I say this, I adore the James Bond franchise. Growing up, it was one of the first big film franchises I can remember watching. Even before watching a Star Wars film, I can remember watching a James Bond film. I don't know what it's like for other people in other countries, but when I was growing up, every summer ITV would show the James Bond films. It became known as the James Bond season because they'd start with Dr. No and finish up with A View to a Kill, and they do it pretty much every year. I didn't know about the books, and to this day I've not read one. I just loved the characters, the villains, the locations, the sets, the stunts, the gadgets, the explosions. It was escapism at a time when my mind really didn't need it, but even back then, legendary Bond moments and lines still drew me in.
Do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die.
The scene with Bond on the table in Goldfinger had me on the edge of my seat. Jaws scared the crap out of me. Knowing Bond and Oddjob were going to square off filled me with dread after seeing what Oddjob was capable of. The series still holds a powerful feeling of nostalgia for me, and even now I love popping in the DVDs of the Ultimate Editions and running the commentaries just because it's fascinating to listen to them. Learning things like the gamble they were taking in making the films to begin with, that creator Ian Fleming didn't agree with Connery's casting, and that the studio wouldn't give the production their asking amount of the budget, which meant they had to cut corners and eventually appeal to the UK office of United Artists to slightly increase the budget just so they could film the climax. Speaking of appealing to studios for a budget, the incredibly talented Mike J of Shameful Sequels is making a film this summer called Nerd Quest. It's a horror film that will feature many of your own beloved Channel Awesome producers, such as myself, Dr. Ashins, me, Film Brain, me, Guru Larry, me, Happy Harry, me, and Masako X. But in order to make this film a reality, he could use your help. Follow the link below this video to find out how you can help Mike realize his vision and systematically, possibly, maybe even see the UK members of Channel Awesome slaughtered on film. It's a horror film. Someone's bound to die. You do know that Mike's actually English. What? Mike's English? Yeah, he is. Well, fuck that. So yeah, I love these films. In fact, I love these films so much that next month I'm going to be doing a James Bond month, which is a direct rip-off of James Rolfe and his Cinemassacre reviews, and a direct rip-off of what Doug did with his Disney reviews. So yeah, admitting I'm a rip-off artist actually makes me feel a whole lot better, and I can't wait until my comment section is flooded with people telling me what a rip-off I am. I can't wait. But there are a number of reasons I believe Casino Royale to be the best Bond film ever made. And while I talk about the film, I'm also going to break down my reasoning as I go, looking at all the factors, with the first factor being Bond himself. Oh yeah, and this review is going to be spoiler heavy. Come on, you shocked? Everyone has their favourite Bond, but for me, it's more that I love all the actors who played him, and they've all brought something new to the role. Sean Connery brought suave and sexiness, George Lazenby brought vulnerability, Roger Moore brought humour, Timothy Dalton brought intensity, and Pierce Brosnan brought a perfect mix of all the elements. The scene of him walking in and discovering Terry Hatcher's dead body is a powerful moment, and it's accomplished through nothing more than Brosnan's reaction. For me, I also have a favourite Bond film that the actor appeared in. I'll explain more about my meaning behind choosing these when I talk about them in my Bond month, but for Connery it was From Russia with Love, George Lazenby obviously goes without saying, Roger Moore was Spy Who Loved Me, Timothy Dalton License to Kill, and Pierce Brosnan was Goldeneye. Now I've only really thought about this recently, but for the majority of my favourites, they are the ones where Bond comes across as his most, I guess you could say, human. He gets beaten up, he's left heartbroken, he gets angry, he gets pissed off, and he gets betrayed. It's a funny thing that for all the stunts and all the gadgets, my favourite films are when he's at his most human and, for the most part, his most vulnerable. This is just another reason I love Casino Royale. It's Bond stripped of everything but his wits. We get to see him before he was a 00 and get to see his first kills, both shown to be very different in execution. I remember people's reactions to Daniel Craig being cast in the role, and while I can understand any time a new actor gets recast in a role it's bound to cause a sense of unease, but what annoyed me more than anything was that people were so quick to judge the actor before they'd even seen him in the part. I mean, did they think he wouldn't try his best or that he wouldn't be able to do the role justice?
I wouldn't dream of it.
People who went off to Facebook and made hate groups for actors like Daniel Craig and Matt Smith when they were announced in their roles before they'd even seen them act these parts, there's no other word for it. These people are idiots. And I'm not going to apologise for saying that. If you see the person act and then decide they suck, then fair enough. But creating a fuss just because a role has been recast in a series when the main actor has been recast many times before just makes you look like a complete dickhead. Yeah, it's fine to show loyalty to the previous actor, but to out and out hate the new one before you've seen him play the part, that is just stupid. Even after the film was released, people complained, yet they were complaining about things that had happened during past moments in the series. I've seen people complain that Bond was too raw or too brutal, because it's not like we've ever seen Bond be raw and brutal before. The man is a trained killer, but to get a case for why this particular actor wasn't right for the role, people would suddenly have a problem with it, conveniently forgetting moments from Bond's past just to justify their reasoning for hating this actor. And if you call them on that, they come back with, well, it's different now, or he's doing it differently, or, my favourite, you're an asshole, you don't know what you're talking about, you're a swear word, you're a gay remark, and then an insult about my mother, etc. It made me recall the scene when Roger Moore's Bond kicks a car off a cliff in From Your Eyes Only, which really caught people off guard back in the day, and even Moore himself. Moore's Bond came across a tad more comical, and so people forgot he was an actual stone-cold killer. It reminds me of Matt Smith's Doctor. We've seen all the Doctors do something cold-blooded and controversial, but due to Smith's Doctor being seen in this light-hearted way, it really caught people off guard when, in The Girl Who Waited, he lied to Amy and left her future self to die. Oh, yeah, spoilers. I can remember the outcry about the Doctor doing this, and I just wondered if people had the same outcry when David Tennant's Doctor murdered an entire race. Or what would the reaction have been if the internet had been around when Moore's Bond kicked that car off the cliff? So what I'm saying is, fans are stupid. No, I'm not. Get a sense of humour, people, and if you think about it, I've just insulted myself and I'm actually serious about that. What I'm saying is that every actor who played Bond had a great film to call his own, and every actor brought something new and different to the role. The big buzz around Casino was that before its release, a little film franchise starring one Matt Damon as Jason Bourne had been slowly taking over the spy genre box office with its realistic fight sequences, its more vulnerable hero, and its lack of gadgets. Its rise paralleled Bond so much that it was a little scary. An actor cast in a role who wasn't the first choice, each film in the series earning more than its predecessor, with a third being a huge hit all over the world. The difference being that after 3 films, the actor who played Bourne, to perfection I might add, left, and now a new actor is going to be carrying the franchise, with the internet proclaiming the end of the franchise and how the new actor would suck. Well, until they saw the trailer anyway. An actor playing the role in a franchise to perfection, then leaving the franchise, only to be replaced by another actor, and the franchise can continue. Didn't do this film series any harm. Or that TV series, for example. You know, sometimes I'm glad the internet wasn't around back in the day, because these days every naysayer with an opinion thinks that their opinion carries equal weight, and they will shout you down if you dare disagree with them in any way, shape or form. What do you mean that's exactly what I'm doing? Bond getting its reboot didn't have something to do with Bourne, it had everything to do with it. Out went the gadgets and in came a Bond who bled and got bruised, a Bond who was vicious with his fists. Like I said earlier, the opening kills went a long way to establishing this new Bond, with the first kill being messy and brutal, and the second being controlled and cold. I love his first kill more than the others due to Bond's reaction, after he's apparently strangled his target to death. It's something we've never seen from another Bond as he takes in this moment of having taken a human life. You can just see that this kill doesn't sit well with him, especially when you compare it to From Russia with Love, where, after strangling Red Grant, he just straightens his suit. Both are messy deaths, but this one in Casino is his first, and the reaction sells it. Also, in a departure from previous Bonds, is the bad guy monologue. So often in Bond you'd have the big bad sit and deliver a spiel about who he is and what their plans are. And it is almost that the film is simply saying, we're not going there this time, by having Bond just shoot his target in mid-sentence. While Bond does react quite coolly to this, we do see later in the film that he can still get affected by what he does, and this makes him a much more realistic character.
You do what I do for too long, and there won't be any soul left to salvage.
There's also a few moments where Bond actually allows his actions to set in, and those are my favourite moments in the film. Later in the movie, Bond murders 2 terrorists in a hotel, and we get a brief sequence where he cleans himself up, drinks alcohol to calm his nerves, and just stares at himself in the mirror while he's covered in blood. This scene is a complete rarity in Bond films, and while it's a scene you could say isn't really needed, I see it as showing the adrenaline wearing off and showing that taking a human life still affects this man. Yes, I know the argument could be raised that people don't want to see Bond like this, but you need to understand that this Bond is being heavily influenced not only by the Bourne films, but by the Bond of the books as well. And if he continued to follow the traditional Bond themes, he wouldn't have been able to survive in this day and age. It harkens back to a speech delivered by M in GoldenEye.
Because I think you're a sexist, misogynist dinosaur.
This speech was written because the studio, with the Cold War ending, didn't really think there was a place for James Bond in the world anymore. By the time Die Another Day was released, this was becoming all the more apparent as films like Bourne were getting much more attention. This is why Bond had to change, and this is why Casino Royale was made. A big reason for the more human element has to go to director Martin Campbell. Campbell was no stranger to the Bond franchise, having directed Pierce Brosnan's debut in GoldenEye, and under his direction, we got a, for the time at least, harder, colder, grittier Bond, yet with the added dose of tongue-in-cheek that the series had established for itself. This was the Bond Timothy Dalton had attempted to portray, which was much more in line with the books. But having just come off the more comical More Bond, people just weren't ready for it. Which was a shame, because I've always felt that Dalton's final film, Licence to Kill, is one of the best James Bond films. Under Campbell, Brosnan portrayed a Bond that seemed like a go-between the Dalton and Connery Bonds, managing the balance of dry humour and cold killer with the vulnerable side that he would let very few people see. It's a reason and a shame that after his great debut, Brosnan's Bond seemed to morph into a one-line spouting machine, which was disappointing for me after the more human character he portrayed in GoldenEye. I guess you could say that it seemed without Campbell's guidance, the Bond character lost his humanity and just became a force of nature. This became even more apparent to me after watching Quantum of Solace, but that's another story for another day, or at least another video, which you can view here. The title sequence gives a nice homage to the eye scope of every Bond opening, shows him being activated as a 00, and fully introduces us to this new Bond. However, this is one of the drawbacks of the movie for me, as they weren't able to produce a truly memorable theme song for it. Films like Goldfinger, Spy Who Loved Me, Licence to Kill, and GoldenEye had some very memorable musical openings, and this is the one area I feel Casino, and indeed every film from Tomorrow Never Dies onwards, has lacked. That being said, I do think the score is implemented well into the film. Casino is the first and only Bond film to really be about Bond. One of the major complaints I hear from people is that he just isn't Bond-like in this film, that he doesn't act like Bond, or he does things that Bond wouldn't do. The simple answer to that is, he isn't Bond in this film. The whole film is about his journey to becoming Bond. The Bond from Connery onwards was a Bond fully formed. This is his origin story, being that it's also the first Bond book. Little touches like the first time he gets the Aston Martin, puts on the tux, meets Felix Leiter, and teases for the vodka martini are all there for the fans. He only speaks the famous words,
The name's Bond. James Bond.
at the film's close, and you don't hear the Bond theme fully formed until this moment. There are teasers through the film as he takes this step to becoming the Bond we know and love, and this is all part of the subtle layering that the film adds that made me fall in love with it. If you think about it, not including the theme could have been a huge risk. The Bond theme is one of the most recognisable themes, not just in cinema, but throughout the world, and so it was a gutsy move not to include it in the film until the credit sequence. But thanks to the story, I didn't really notice its absence, and when you do finally hear it, it feels like Bond has earned it. Craig himself manages to nail everything that's right for a modern day Bond. He's intense, violent, a tad sexist, arrogant, but then caring, considerate, and always driven, determined, and utterly ruthless. The opening chase where Bond pursues a bomb maker is used to not only show you don't need gadgets to make a Bond film work, but helps say everything that Craig's Bond is about. The whole sequence is just incredible, with Sebastian Falcon as Moloch performing amazing parkour stunts and Bond, through sheer grit and determination, just keeping up. My favourite moment of the sequence is when Moloch flies through a vent so sleekly only for Bond to come crashing through the wall. It manages to wow the audience, yet every stunt and moment is used to enhance character, and was performed and shot so perfectly that, as far as I'm concerned, you could not have improved on it, and yet they try to recreate it in Quantum of Solace. Only here, Bond is made to look superhuman and the close camera angles give a very disjointed feel. After the chase, Moloch enters the Numbata embassy only for Bond to walk in and take him captive, which leads to a firefight. Now, whereas the whole chase sequence couldn't have been filmed, performed or staged better, the embassy shootout feels too much like an over-the-top Bond set piece. And after the chase, this actually feels out of place to me. I'm not saying it's badly written, badly shot, or even badly acted, but after this intensely thrilling chase, we now have this normal type scenario with bullets flying everywhere, very similar to the complex escape in GoldenEye. There just isn't anything really new about it from an action standpoint, although it does show off another beat in Bond's character. In this case, his ego. This is something that's touched on many times in the film.
I want you to take your ego out of the equation.
There isn't enough room for me and your ego.
This isn't the first time Bond's ego has been mentioned in the franchise.
But of course, I forgot your ego, Mr. Bond. James Bond, who only has to make love to a woman and she starts to hear heavenly choir singing.
But it is the first time it's been a factor in the plot. And it's a hint that what drives Bond into marching into the embassy isn't a matter of national service, it's because Moloch beat him and he can't take it. The sequence is also redeemed somewhat by its ending, where Bond, cornered, releases Moloch before coldly gunning him down and disappearing with his bag and views his mobile phone, cluing him into his next lead. Just having Bond with all this modern technology feels slightly strange, Tomorrow Never Dies excluded, but it just signals that this is a different world from the Bond of the 60s. The days of the indestructible hero and the moustache-twirling villain just really won't wash anymore, and this leads me nicely onto the villain of the piece, Le Chiffre. The Bond franchise lives and dies on the casting of the man playing the role of 007, but the films themselves can live and die on the villain who will go against Bond. The rogues gallery of James Bond reads like a who's who of some of the greatest villains and henchmen in cinema history. Goldfinger, Oddjob, Red Grant, Blofeld, Scaramanga, Blofeld again, Jaws, Knick-Knack, Baron Samedi, Blofeld, Winton Kid. The list could go on and on. Le Chiffre is very different from nearly every Bond villain of the past. Unlike previous adversaries, he's not looking to take over the world or kill millions and millions upon people. Le Chiffre's plan, initially, is to use his contact's money to invest in stocks, which will skyrocket once he destroys a prototype airliner to a competing company. The first time we see him at a camp in Uganda, everything is given a mysterious air, and you as a viewer really have to pay attention to what's going on. A man called Mr. White has set up this meeting. Le Chiffre is being paid a huge sum of money. If anything, even though Le Chiffre is the focus of the scene, he's not the main villain of the film. It's more these guys, as Le Chiffre is more a hired gun. This, in itself, is a departure from the Bond villains, and once Bond foils the initial plan, Le Chiffre's next objective is to win back the money he gambled from his contacts. So quite simply, he's just trying to save his own skin. Not take over the world, not kill hundreds of thousands of people, he just wants to survive. The small appearances Le Chiffre makes through the first half of the film all help to build his character. We see that he has asthma, he weeps blood. Is ice cool under pressure, is incredibly confident in his own abilities.
Do you believe in God, Mr. Le Chiffre?
No. I believe in a reasonable rate of return.
And is an excellent poker player who can read and calculate the odds.
I have Japan, you have a 17.4% chance of making it straight.
The only reason Bond is sent to stop Le Chiffre winning the poker game is because they hope losing will force him to turn to MI6 for protection, where he can give up the information on his contacts. Mads Mikkelsen portrays the gambler and does a really good job in the role, as Le Chiffre isn't insane, or maniacal, or a scene-chewing bad guy. He's a human villain who's simply trying to save his own neck. It runs the risk of creating sympathy for him, but thanks to the performance and his actions, we never quite feel that, and it makes him a much more human villain. Another departure is that, unlike other Bond villains, we never actually see him kill anyone. Although he does attempt to have Bond poisoned, and he is clearly behind the death of Solange,
Someone talked.
we never witness him performing these actions. His level of calm and strength under pressure is emphasized so well that when he actually gets angry, it's a surprise and it can scare you, because even when he's shouting in Bond's face, he's still in complete control, and this makes him even more dangerous.
But you are so wrong!
The more I think about it, the more I'm not only impressed with the writing, but with the performance as well, and while he'd probably never make it onto most people's top 10 lists when it comes to Bond villains, he'd definitely be high on mine. top 10 Bond villain list. Now there's an idea. We're then introduced to the only returning actor from the previous Bond films, Dame Judi Dench playing M, and I can't help but notice a slight ironic twist in this casting. When she was originally cast in the role back in GoldenEye, I remember people being up in arms about the fact that James Bond's boss was going to be a woman.
You don't like me, Bond?
Granted, she's no Bernard Lee, but then she's not trying to be, and she's much more active than Lee ever was, and now I wouldn't want anyone else in the role if I'm honest, and it's also a great way to play off Bond, as Bond is a very sexist character, and does like to use women, so having a woman who is not only immune to his charms, but also gets to tell him what to do, is a great way to freshen up the relationship. Add in that they develop the relationship through each film, and it's a great friendship that forms, showing that Bond does respect M, and M values Bond's skills. To break it down simply, she's almost like a frustrated parent dealing with an adolescent child. A little later, Bond breaks into M's apartment, again, a first for the Bond movies, and earns a complete scolding from her.
We wanted to question him, not to kill him!
It's one of only 2 scenes they have together face to face, but it matters, and it's memorable thanks to the performance from both actors. Bond departs for the Bahamas, and now we're in complete James Bond territory, with beautiful women and stunning locations. Initially leaving M to believe that he's taking time off, he, in fact, follows up on his lead, whose location he discovered using M's computer. It leads him to the Ocean Club, where he manages to cause a disturbance and gain access to the security room. I like how all this is performed and staged. There's no filler or unneeded dialogue, and Craig completely captivates you while he's on screen. And while you could say that, yeah, it's convenient that he manages to just find all this information without any hassle, the pacing is so sharp that it doesn't leave you any time to question it. Discovering when the text message was sent, he inquires about the living quarters and sets out to meet Mr. Dimitrios. And now we get our first introduction to a Bond woman, and this nicely leads me into the women of Bond. Just like the villains, the women of Bond are another important element of the Bond franchise. While their inclusion won't make or break a film like the casting of Bond or the villain will, the women of James Bond and their very names have become part of the culture and have been spoofed and parodied until infinity.
My name is Pussy Galore.
I must be dreaming.
I'm looking for Dr. Goodhead.
You just found her. Xenia Sergeyevna on the top.
On the top?
On the top.
Admittedly, in the early days, they were generally used as eye candy and were nothing more than mere objects for Bond to have his way with, and he would often show very little respect to them, talk down to them, hit them, and it's heavily implied in From Russia with Love that he has a threesome with 2 gypsy sisters. Lucky bastard. Growing up, I had no idea of the double meanings for names like Pussy Galore or Dr. Goodhead, and I still can't believe they were allowed to get away with it. Women's roles in films have changed a lot since the 1960s, and thanks to leading lady action stars like Ripley and Sarah Connor, as well as the surge in female power with shows like Buffy, the Bond women became much more action-orientated in later films, and would often use Bond just as much as Bond used them. Although I do think it's getting slightly out of hand these days. Who in their right mind would want to go and see... I take it all back. Sometimes, though, they were still used as eye candy. But in the case of Casino Royale, the character Solange represents the classic Bond victim. She's used by Bond and then killed off as a result. Vesper Lynd is the opposite. She's a challenge to Bond and is also the most important female in the entire Bond franchise because it's from her relationship that Bond becomes the man he is. In no better place is it shown that we're living in a different world is from the scene where Bond emerges from the water. The scene of Honey Ryder emerging from the ocean in Dr. No became such an iconic image, but by the time of this film, it's Bond himself who's become the object the women are looking at. Director Martin Campbell claimed he wasn't aware of the fuss this would cause, but I really can't believe that. I mean, why else would he stick Craig in those swim shorts? Later that evening, we get our first opportunity to see Bond playing poker. Again, everything is being used to show character on Bond's part, and after dominating the game, Dimitrov offers up his own card to show how confident he is at his winning hand. He, of course, loses, and upon winning the game and winning the Aston Martin, we hear the first beat of the Bond theme. Dimitrov visits Le Chiffre, who pushes Dimitrov into finding a replacement bomber for his plan, as we learn it was Dimitrov who recommended Moloch to begin with. While this is happening, Bond grills his wife for information. This is another point I'd like to raise about the film. Whereas in the Bonds of old, they would have had this female character be a completely clueless woman who was simply there to amuse Bond. Here, she's fully aware of what he wants from her, but is more than happy to use Bond just as much as he's going to use her.
I'm also afraid you will sleep with me in order to get to him.
How afraid?
Not enough to stop.
While it does add a sense of character to her that would have been absent in Bond films of the past, it does paint a rather accurate picture of how a number of people view marriage and relationships these days. That being said, the film does have to fall into the cliché hole that shows Dimitrov has to treat her like shit so you don't lose sympathy for her.
If that was for luck, you're 2 hours late.
It's a fine line the film has to walk with the characters, and it manages it quite well. When Bond discovers Dimitrov is heading to Miami, he immediately departs, which comes across as a tad cold based on what we've seen so far from him, but it just sums up this Bond at the moment. He's detached and doesn't get emotionally involved. Bond follows Dimitrov and spots him planting his bag, only for Dimitrov to surprise him. Bond disposes of him by stabbing him with his own knife, in a fun sequence as both men are attempting to remain casual while attempting to assassinate the other. Rid of Dimitrov, Bond shadows the new bomber through Miami airport, which pays off the message on the phone and leads to a huge chase across the runway. This, from a set-piece standpoint, feels like they're going more and more into the old Bond territory with the stunts, but then gets a new and fresh factor with the fighting. Bond gets scarred and bloody, and really looks like he's been through a war by the time he emerges from the bus. Interesting note on my part though, while I was watching this back, is I noticed at the end of the sequence where he outsmarts the bomber and watches with a smile as he blows himself up, that there was an absence of another Bond staple, the dry one-liner.
Quite revealing.
They'll print anything these days.
Q's not gonna like this.
This is something I felt almost became Pierce Brosnan's undoing as Bond. Watching GoldenEye, he has a dry sense of humour, yes, but he feels like a complete character who actually suffers through the scenes he's in. The small sequence of him sitting on the beach is one of those personal moments we rarely see in a Bond film, but from Tomorrow Never Dies onwards, the writers and producers almost felt the need to end every sequence and sometimes every scene with a dry one-liner.
Backseat driver.
Now, I'm not saying the films didn't supply these personal moments. A good example, and one of my favourite moments from Tomorrow Never Dies, is when Bond is sitting alone in his hotel room, pouring himself a drink, just waiting for Carver's assassin. But these moments became rarer and rarer the longer Brosnan held the role. And no, I'm not putting the blame on Brosnan for this. It became cliched and boring and turned Bond into a walking caricature of what he used to be, and that's why I like this moment. Bond outsmarts the bomber and simply smiles. It adds a degree of badassness, is that a word, that would have been lacking had he uttered a one-liner to close the sequence, and also makes him look, I'm sorry to say, a tad sinister, which is what he's supposed to be. Back at the hotel, Bond discovered Solange was tortured and killed due to supplying Bond with the information he used in a scene he barely reacts to. I like this scene due to Bond being covered in scars from the night before, and leads into M giving Bond his official assignment for the film.
I'm putting you in the game, replacing someone who's playing for a syndicate. According to Villiers, you're the best player in the service.
A mirror opposite of their earlier scene, this one is played with Bond being much colder and M more motherly.
I would ask you if you could remain emotionally detached. But I don't think that's your problem, is it, Bond?
No.
And just to keep an eye on him with his vitals, Bond gets bugged.
Ow.